What's going on, everybody? We got a tutorial here for you today. As you can see, we've got a PlayStation 2 fat console in front of us, and excuse me, we're going to be taking care of an console that doesn't turn on. And like a few of my other videos I've done recently, this issue isn't just something where I can give you like a quick here's 3 quick steps to fix your PlayStation 2. It just doesn't work like that because there's many things that can happen. There's many causes for it. So I think it's just going to be better to go through all of them. I know for some people that makes the video a little longer and you want to get right to the point. But for most of you, you're probably not even going to know why it's not turning on. So we've got to figure out what's causing it first. And then we can move into showing you how to get it taken care of. First things first, as you can see, we are going to be going inside and dealing with the electronics today. I wear gloves because I deal with a lot of consoles, just to, not have to worry about static electricity and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's pretty well known that you're not going to have many issues with that. It'd be extremely rare for something like that to happen or to even be able to cause damage. Um, just make sure when you're dealing with this that you don't have it plugged in. If you have a little bit of a static charge and it's plugged in and turned on or anything, that can cause a zap and fry something. So just keep that in mind. Of course, you could also get shocked if you touch something, but just as far as seeing my gloves, it's not something you have to have. Besides that, there's really not much to cover besides getting on in there. So what we're going to do first is we're going to actually open it up. Now, I'm just assuming you've already tested it, and it doesn't turn on. Now, one thing I do want to differentiate real quick. When we're talking about a console that doesn't turn on, you're talking about you've plugged it in here in the back. You flip the switch to the on position, which is the one with the line. So that's going to be in the on position. And once you do that, you look at the front and you don't have either, no lights in front here. So no red light on the reset. It's just totally blank. Now, there's an exception to this. Sometimes the LEDs can go bad, or you can have an issue with the ribbon that connects these. So every once in a while, you could have a console that looks like it's not turning on because there's no lights. But actually, you can hit the reset button, and you'll see that you look at the screen, and it actually did turn on. So if you haven't done that yet, go ahead and plug it back in and hit that reset button, even if you don't see the light and you know that it's on in the back, because you never know. You could just have an issue with these, but it could still turn on. So definitely start with that. Otherwise, what we're going to do is we're just going to get inside of it, and actually, wow. Now that I'm looking, this console only even has 2 screws holding it together. So we're just going to take out, wrong size, of course. We're going to take out each of these. Now, one thing to keep in mind, you've got, this one only had 2. I've never actually opened this one yet. I just know it doesn't turn on. But, obviously you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screws. On this version, and you have to kind of take something like a tiny Phillips head or something like this, and you pry up the feet. There's 8 rubber feet, and then there's the 8 plastic flat ones, and then that's how you get in there. This one was just already like that. Then all we're going to do after we get them all out, oh, and one other thing too, if you've got a real early version, underneath right here in the front, you can have 2 more, I believe, or maybe is it 3? No, it's 2 more screws there, so you might have to take those out if you've got a real early version. All right, so now we've got that done. So what we're going to do first is actually the first thing we're going to be dealing with, I talked about these buttons a little bit already, but if you've done that and it still doesn't turn on, still no light, still nothing on the screen, we're going to deal with the electronics of this directly. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to peel off this top shell first. So what you want to do is you take it from the back here where my fingers are, and you kind of pry it up this way while leaving the front down. And then that way you can kind of wedge it out safely. Now I've got it totally gone. Don't rip this thing out. Do not pull it more than, this is maybe, 4 or 5 inches off. don't like pull it up and try to pull it away because there is a ribbon. So we're going to move this. And as you can see, this is the ribbon that connects to those front buttons right here. And that's why you want to be careful, because if you rip it out too hard, it can mess this ribbon up. And we will talk about that here in just a second. So what we're looking for here now is, and this is again the first thing we're looking at. There's a lot of other things after this one, but this is the easiest to replace or fix, so that's where we're starting. This is especially helpful, you know, if you bought this console, you found it at a Goodwill or something like that, you know, and you don't really know the history on it. It is very likely that maybe somebody might have opened this up in the past and did exactly what I just talked about and screwed this ribbon up. So if this ribbon is screwed up, or a lot of times what will happen is, I'm going to go ahead and let me go ahead and get this out. Now, it is kind of a pain to get this out. What you do is you put a flathead or something, again, like I'm not actually sure what these type of tools are called, but you just get it underneath this switch thing on the back and then slightly pull up, and then it kind of pops out, and then you pull it away, and that way we can get it disconnected. It's a lot safer to deal with this when it's not in the case. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to inspect all this, okay? I'm going to pull this ribbon out here to kind of show you guys. Oh, and one other thing, too, to keep in mind, if you have a console that's a 5001 model, I've got one sitting here, 1 second here. Those look a little different. So this is don't mind me, I've got it all pulled apart. This one, as you can see, the power and open and reset buttons are actually connected and attached to the disk drive itself. This still applies here, but now this is just attached to this instead of the inside of the case. And it's still got a ribbon, which you can see right here, that goes in there. It's just a lot shorter. But yeah, it's the same thing. It just looks a little different, just so you know. Now, as far as this one, I pulled out the ribbon. Something that happens in this one does not. Oh, and look, sure enough, this console, this is going to be what the issue is here. If you look at this part of the ribbon, the one that was plugged into it, there is supposed to be a blue, most of the time it's blue, piece of plastic that's attached to the back of this ribbon. And that's essentially a stabilizer. It looks kind of like this. Here's one that's actually fallen off of another one. But it looks kind of like that. This one's a different one. But what it does is it's attached to the back like this. And it's a stabilizer because this ribbon is real flimsy and weak. It's got to have something stiffer and harder as far as the plastic. So that makes it easy to put it in and out of the connectors or slots. And so as you can see on this one, it doesn't have one. And the ribbon just is in really bad shape. The way it's bent and there's a lot of creases in it like that, that could easily have a trace that's jacked up. It's hard to say. So in reality, I want to replace all this. Now, also keep in mind, now again, this is going to be a tiny bit different. You know, you could have one of these, by the way, that looks like an actual set of wires. And that's pretty much the same concept. The only difference is, though, the one that used the wires is actually much more stable. So it'd be really rare to have something wrong with that cable, but still worth checking. This is also connected most of the time to the disk drive or motherboard itself, depending on what version you have. A couple of them go into the disk drive, some of them go directly into the motherboard. This version does go directly into the motherboard. So there's also this side of the ribbon that you need to check. And it's going to be real obvious, because if it's just sitting there and flopping and you can just easily pull it out, like, don't pull it hard, but you can see I'm just barely tugging on it lightly here. It's not coming out. So it should be attached and good on that side. But if you pull it lightly and it just comes right out, or, you know, is already out, then check that side too and make sure it has the stabilizing piece of plastic on there. The other thing too is, obviously you could get in there and this is just straight up disconnected. You know, the ribbon's fine, everything looks fine. Could have just been somebody forgot to reconnect it that had opened it before you, or if you were messing with it, maybe you accidentally forgot to put the ribbon back in. But anyways, that's your first thing. And on this particular console, I'm 99.9% sure that this ribbon is why the console wasn't turning on. But what we're going to do is we'll actually start moving on to the next one. All you're going to want to do is if you see any issues with this ribbon, you get a replacement one. Right now, I don't get a lot of these because there's so many that are damaged, but I am going to put a link in the description. You can see if I've got any of these in stock because I do sell these as well, and they're not really expensive. That's the good part about it. If you pay more than $15, then that's a little bit much for these. So, or if you notice there's any damage to the button itself, replacing that is really cheap as well. So all you're going to do with those, or you're going to replace everything. Now, I will show you how to get to this end if you need to, because it's going to go into the next stage. So if you've done all that, the ribbon was connected and looked good, and nothing was wrong with it, nothing looked wrong with the button, at that point we're 99% sure that it has nothing to do with that. So we're going to move on to the next part. The next part is obviously, as most of you are going to guess, is the power supply. So the power supply, obviously, if it goes out, it's not going to be providing power in anything, so it's not going to turn on. And there are a lot of models of these power supplies that just don't last well. They have a lot of capacitor issues. So yeah, what we're going to do is we're just going to take out a few more screws so that we can get to our power supply. Now, again, with certain versions, the really early versions, your power supply is actually going to be sitting right here. These are actually the smaller form version ones for the early 3001 models, or 3000, whatever your country is. They have a small power supply that's actually attached right to the top, and you can access it, without having to do anything. If that's the case, most of this that I'm about to show you can just skip, because you're going to be able to unscrew that power supply right now. Yeah, so we got to get the screws out that have the controller ports attached. It's usually two of them. One of the models only has one. We're going to take this, which is the plug and the power switch. We're just going to pull it out of this little thing just to kind of get it out of our way. And then we got a screw here. And really, that should be about all you want to take out. But sometimes I go ahead and just take all these out, because right now our case should be loose enough. And if you have the expansion bay, I forgot to mention that, pull the expansion bay out. So as you can see, this is coming out. So we're just going to kind of open it like this, just grab this and get the lower case out of the way. So for this one, as you can see, now we're at the bottom of the console, and this is actually our power supply. We'll go ahead and we're going to take out the 4 screws for it. Again, if you have the console where the power supply was right on top, you're still doing the same thing. It just looks different. All right, so this actually has a connector, a 4-prong connector that goes down through the other side and through the motherboard. So what we got to do is grab all 4 sides as best you can, and we're going to kind of wiggle it a little bit, and you'll feel it kind of snap, because you'll see that we've got our 4-prong connector right here. Make sure we can show that a little better. That's what it's attached to. It's a big old thing. And then, of course, this is still attached to this. Now, let's see. This is a 62311 model. So right here, and they're in different places. Sometimes it'll be like right here, or right here, or right here. But there is a model, actually specifically a part number. And as you can see, it's always going to be 1468. And then there's 62311. Okay, so if you've got that, we've got 2 options, and there's a reason I bring that up, because we've got 2 options on how to deal with a power supply that's bad. If you have soldering skills and things like that, these can be repaired, because this is a capacitor issue. Just keep in mind that this is not like you see on a lot of capacitors where they bust on the top. And a lot of time you'll see like this yellow, orange, like crusty crap on top of them, and you'll see the tops are like bulging out and popped open. This is an issue where that doesn't happen. It actually leaks from the bottom of the capacitor and then leaks onto the board. Sometimes, if it's bad enough, you can actually look and see that like the board is clean, but then you'll see this area where it's just dust. It looks like it's almost stuck to the board. That's a great indicator. I'm not going to go in to show you, like, it's a whole nother video to show you how to put new capacitors on this. And, you know, I'm not trying to have a 4-hour video just to cover this. So right now we're just going to say that most of the time the caps that are right here closest to the heatsink, and I have, so we got this capacitor here, this one here, and again, depending on what version power supply, they're a little bit different. But the rule of thumb is usually 9 times out of 10, your issue is coming from the capacitors that are right near the heat sinks. If you don't know, these little metal bits here are actually considered heat sinks. So those are the capacitors you would want to replace. Sometimes, again, these types of ones that are bigger, those can do the same thing, but it's almost always like, in this one, it would be this one more than likely. So you can recap it. You would just need to, you know, find the right caps and get the right stats and everything and replace them based on your power supply. Now, for the vast majority of people, I understand that, desoldering a couple of capacitors and stuff like that is not possible for you. So obviously, your next thing is just going to be to replace the power supply. Now, the great news about this is these are actually pretty, right now, these are still pretty cheap. But we are going to go over a few things just so you understand, like, how, what you need to get to replace this. We talked about our model number earlier. If you have any 3000 model, technically, besides the early 3001, so the ones that have one of these, but it's on the other side that we talked about earlier, those are smaller. They're about like that wide compared to this wide. Those, you have to get one of those types. But otherwise, any of these will technically work with any 3000. It's 3000, 35,000, and then 39. Once it switches to 5,000, then it's out of spec, and so those are totally different power supplies, and they have a slight difference in the PCB design. But the issue with what people doing this is that while they do run it because the voltages are correct, they do still have a little bit different spec when you're talking about things like your amps, even your ohms sometimes. So I don't really like just doing any power supply. I like to make sure that I get one that's in the same family. So what that means, right, is, again, we talked about, and I hope, maybe that number will show up good on the video. I can't tell if it will or not. But that number right there, the 1-468-623-11, the family is the second to last number. So in this case, it's 623. Let me give you another example. This one right here is another one. That's another 623. We got this one right here. This one's 60431. That 6 number, or some of them are 7 for 5,000. That's the family. Let me get those out of the way. So anything that has the same third number, is in the same family. So it can be 604, 21, 11, 31, 51, 41, whatever. Those are all in the same family, and they're going to run at the same specs. The only difference in if you're using the same family is that they're usually revisions. Maybe they found a little issue with something, and they decided to use a different part. Maybe they found a way to manufacture it better, so they slightly revise it. So anything, and I always make sure I get something in the same family. So in this one, if we were replacing the original one, we would not use this one because this is 60431, while this one is 62311. So I would want to find one that's 1-468-623, and then any of the last number versions. So I believe it's 11, 21, or 31. That's usually my rule of thumb, because you won't have any difference in your amperages anywhere. It's not huge differences and stuff, but it is enough where I feel like if you were prone to power surges and things like that, having the difference could, be the difference in maybe a bad storm knocking out and, possibly ruining your power supply again. So that's what you need to get as far as the power supply and how to find the power supply. And again, if you have the soldering iron and stuff, you don't mind doing some soldering, you can repair these really easy. It just takes, it's usually just one or two caps that need to be replaced. Real cheap to do so. Um, so yeah, you got that too. Now, if we've gotten to that point, let's say you had an extra power supply already for some reason, or let's just say you went ahead and bought one. Oh wait, before we move on, you also want to be careful about the generic ones. You will see a lot of these like on eBay, different websites, Amazon even. I've seen these before where they're saying these are brand new for PlayStation 2. Those are aftermarket reverse engineered parts, and those are very low quality. So even though if you get an original one, you're still getting an older part, it's still better, I think, than getting those cheap clones because those, I swear, those die, within a month or two sometimes. They have none of the same surge protection stuff on them. That use as few components as possible to just get the same specs that it needs, and that's it. So keep that in mind too. I would stay away from any of those. Get one that's OEM or authentic. The next thing is now, let's say we've done all that, all this is back together. You go to turn on the console and it's still not working. This is when we get into the part where you've got some sort of major damage. If you had a situation where maybe there was a flood, in your basement and the PS2, was underwater, this would probably almost for sure happen to you, where you could replace all this stuff, but it still won't turn on. And that's going to be something to do with your motherboard. There's a few different things, but we're essentially talking about a major failure. We would be talking about having to test all the like MOSFETs. I think there's MOSFETs on here. I can't remember now. But you'd be testing everything that's part of a power rail regulator system. You'd have to check each component with something like a multimeter, which, if y'all don't know, it's one of these. It's where you're hooking them up and testing 2 points to make sure they test at the correct volts, or in some cases amps, because we're dealing with a power issue. Your amps could be just as much of a problem as your volts there, because if you've got the right voltage but no amps, then you're still not going to have power. So the problem with that is that you're talking about major repair. This would be something for professionals only, and those people obviously are not going to be here watching this video because they already know all this stuff. This is for people who don't really know, they're just trying to learn, trying to fix up their old console. Maybe they found one somewhere and they want to fix it up and get it working and playing some games again. So I'm not going to go into like peeling the motherboard out of here and checking all the components and stuff, but I at least wanted to go over it so you guys could consider that when you're deciding what to do with these things. The other option, too, if you get to that point, is you can simply just replace the motherboard. And again, for power supplies and these motherboards, I'm going to have links if you look in the description for the video where you can go and find some motherboards. You can find power supplies, and these are all OEM, original, authentic power supplies, original motherboards and stuff like that. And you can go get you a new motherboard. Replacing it is not much different. If you've got to this point, all you got to do to replace the motherboard is take out the little screws and then peel it off, put the metal on the new one, and put it back in place, and you're good to go. But yeah, I'm not going to show all that to you again. Most people, it's going to be the button or this power supply. Anybody that, like, 9 times out of 10, any of the major problems that can cause the motherboard to be completely dead and not power on, most people are going to know that because they're going to know something weird happened to it, like I dropped it out of a car on a highway somehow, or it fell off a bridge, or who knows what, or it was in a flood, whatever crazy story. You're going to have an idea that okay, it was something to do with that. Otherwise, almost everybody else, it'll be your power supply or your button issue. And again, links in the descriptions. And wow, that's gross. A lot of gross stuff in this console. Anyways, that's all for this video, and that pretty much covers all of it. And I hope this helps and helps you get back to gaming and stuff like that again. And yeah, until next time, guys.